federal government's role is in regulating the funding of abortion, gay marriage, and medical marijuana?
What do I think the federal government's role in regulating these things is, including, I don't think they should have any role in those things.
Will you strongly and publicly support the promotion of traditional family values, and how would you go about it?
Well, yes, but the only real meaningful way to do it is to just live your life to the best of your ability and to try to practice what you preach. I mean, I don't believe in preaching to people. I don't believe in moralizing to people. I think the single best way I can do it, however imperfectly I may do it, is to live out those beliefs in my own life and in the life of my family to the best of my ability. And I think it's the power of example, much more than the power of words, that will have an impact.
Prior to the 2006 loss of Congress, President Bush promoted a marriage amendment to the Constitution. Is that a conservative principle?
Yes, for two reasons. One, because protecting family values and the sanctity of marriage is a conservative principle. And second, because the Constitution permits amendments to the Constitution. So, you know, it is inherent in the Constitution that people would be free over time to adopt amendments. So it's not antithetical to the Constitution to have people promoting constitutional amendments that they think would make our country better. So that's why I don't think it's inconsistent either with being a constitutionalist, and I certainly don't think it's inconsistent with being a conservative from a social perspective. Well, yes, but you see, you have to understand something. We can't legislate any particular religious viewpoint. We shouldn't. But to me, the sanctity of marriage transcends any particular religious or theological viewpoint. There is a functional, non-theological reason why I believe marriage should be between a man and a woman. And it's not the imposition of one individual's religious faith on another. If that's what I thought it was, I would say that's improper.
Thank you.
Sam, we're going to move on now to the vetting questions.
Sure.
So what we're going to do is, if anyone on the panel has a question about anything we answered no to, we're going to ask you to follow up.
This is question number 2 from the vetting questions.
Actually, do you
I have them.
have a copy? Okay,
Yeah,
great.
I do.
Because we're going to skip probably the first half of that question because it's all kind of explanatory.
About Wickard versus Stover.
Right, so we're going to skip down to the actual question, the body of the question.
Do you commit to oppose and vote against any proposed legislation that purports to regulate or otherwise involve the federal government in any areas that are not specifically and expressly enumerated in the Constitution and are therefore reserved as the exclusive province of states such as education, energy, welfare, labor issues, non-interstate roads, farm subsidies, etc.?
Yeah, to the best of my ability, yes. And when I went back and looked at that answer, I probably should have put yes. I think one of the things, just so you know, that made it hard on some of the questions is I've always been very, very careful not to over-represent and then disappoint later on. And some of your questions are so unequivocal that, you know, I tried very hard not to overcommit if I couldn't think of a circumstance. You know, I don't ever want any of you to come back and say you didn't do what you said you were going to do. And sometimes that made me very careful in the answers that I made. But when I went back and looked at this question, I really should have answered yes.
If you have that feeling, you maybe should have left it no answer or questionable rather than a no.
Yeah, well, you know, the reason I didn't leave a no answer is because, you know, I don't like people who run away from answering questions. You know, and so you know, I suppose leaving a no answer was a strategy I could have taken, but I guess I wasn't, you know, I felt that these questions really forced you to take a position one way or another, and if I didn't feel completely comfortable saying yes 100% down the line, I thought it was better for me to say no and talk with you about it. But again, on this particular question, upon further reflection, I would have answered yes.
I'm going to skip down to question number 10 and 11, Sam.
Yeah.
And they really have to do with GSEs, and I would assume they're specifically referring to things like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
Yeah.
And also the Community Reinvestment Act.
Yeah.
And you answered no to privatizing the secondary mortgage market, and basically eliminating things like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. That would be question number 10.
Yeah.
I just wondered why you would not go for the privatization of the...
Well, see, because when I read this question, I was really focused on the first part, which is the elimination of all GSEs altogether.
Okay.
If I had read this to mean transitioning from GSEs to privatization in some orderly fashion, I may have had a different answer.
Okay.
But the way I read this question, I wasn't prepared on the day I answered the question to tell you that I was prepared to commit to eliminate all GSEs.
Absolutely. Okay. And then question number 11 has to do with the Community Reinvestment Act.
Yeah.
And voting or creating legislation that would actually repeal that.
Yeah. That's one where I'm not convinced that's the right thing to do. I think the Community Reinvestment Act has been expanded and abused. But I think the original purpose of the Community Reinvestment Act, given historic discrimination in our country, was well-intentioned. And I'm not prepared right now, given what CRA was originally supposed to do, and given our history of discrimination, racial and otherwise, in this country, to tell you that I was prepared to eliminate CRAs. As I study it more and learn more about it, I might be able to get there. But for the reasons I've just described, I couldn't in all honesty and in good faith tell you today that I would vote to eliminate them. Thank you.
All right, going back up to 5, do you commit to oppose the granting of any federal grants that are not directly related to some power specifically delegated to the federal government?
The answer is probably yes, and the reason I answered no is because I don't know what every federal grant is, and I don't know what the argument is as to whether it was related to a constitutional authority or not. And so in an effort to be careful and to err on the side of caution, I said no. But let me put it this way. I've already told you that I think we ought to look at everything we do from a framework of this. Is this consistent with constitutional authority? If it's not consistent with constitutional authority, I don't think it should be being done at the federal level. But, you know, the way you worded the question, and given the thousands of federal grants that are out there, you know, I didn't feel comfortable answering yes unequivocally. But I will tell you what approach I would take. And the approach I would take on every issue that I deal with is the one that I've just laid out for you. Is this constitutional? Do I believe this falls within the authority of the federal government, as enumerated in the Constitution? If the answer is no, it's going to be very hard for me to support it as a constitutionalist.